Hello and welcome everybody to the Let Me Ask You This podcast. I'm your host, Chris Del Pozo, and this is a podcast that we are designed to debunk mental health misconceptions one episode at a time. I've got a special guest here. He's an exceptional individual. He started at the bottom, pushing shopping carts, and he became a touring drummer, traveling the country. He then pursued a career in sales, dealing with major companies like Bright House Network, leading himself to currently as a chief marketing officer, a CMO for a company called Denango EV. And he played a pretty important role to that company, considering that he helped them launch a $250 million IPO. He's going to be launching his own podcast where he's going to be going over topics of challenges and triumphs that he has been able to achieve in his multifaceted life. And please allow me to introduce the man that I still have yet to been able to beat in chess, Brendan Lesser.
What's up, man? You beat me once when I took away 2 pieces.
Yeah, you gave me a huge handicap, and then I was able to beat you.
Yeah. I think
it was like 5 pieces.
Was it 5?
I want to say you were missing your knight and your bishop. I think you only had the castles, and
I think my castles and queen, but I had no way to really attack or set up my mid game very well.
Yes.
Early game and mid game I was instantly in the late game, but a lot of people don't know what that means, so we don't have to get into the theories of chess. But
well, still, we were just talking about earlier, I do have an extreme appreciation for chess just because it really makes you think. You really have to be strategic about it. And I will say I never really considered the aspect of essentially you get better as the more you can memorize.
Well, it's how do I explain it? Like it's a game about studying and memorization, really, and recognizing patterns. So, and the other beauties of chess is how some of its philosophies get better. They do equate to like some things in life, you know, like equal trades, gambits,
Well, I think people tend to pursue better in life when you think in long terms. If you're thinking of multiple steps ahead of what you're doing, you're going to have a better opportunity of reaching that outcome rather than just thinking for the moment.
Yeah. I mean, chess has an early game, a mid game, and a late game, and you're planning for all of them.
So let's go ahead and get started, man. One of the things that I really appreciate and resonate was one of the facts that you are as well are a drummer, right? So what got you into music? Let's start with that.
I was 11, and I had to choose my electives going into middle school. And I chose band, and I looked at all the instruments in there, and I thought the coolest one was the drums. So I started there. I got drumsticks and the pad and started learning all the rudiments. So that's really where it started. My family didn't want me to drum either because my family didn't like my father, which I've only met him like twice my whole life. But he was a drummer apparently. Okay. And they were like, you can't be like him. And like I fought for it. I was like, I want to drum. So eventually I did it.
All right. Yeah. So when you started in band, I presume that you were talking about on a snare drum and then
percussion.
Eventually...
Yeah. Marimba, snare drum, bass drum, all that stuff, like playing xylophone, like all that stuff, learning theory there. So there was like other dimensions. It wasn't like I started off on a drum kit. Like I started off learning theory and reading sheet music, which came to a big advantage later on.
Right. Was music... So once you have reached that point in your life, was that something that you've already like established, like this is what I want to do?
It's the way that progressed is really weird. Like I just really liked drumming, and then made a best friend, so to speak, the guy you ride the bus with, and a new kid came into school, and me and him became best friends, and he was a drummer, so we just kept drumming like from 6th grade all the way to senior year. We both were drummers. Nice. So, and nice little camaraderie and competition between ourselves, so especially through middle school. And then going into high school, I started bridging more into the kit the drum kit, hi-hat, studying that as an instrument. And while, my friend at the time, he went into study further into drumline stuff, chops and advanced techniques. And I studied that too. I just had no interest in being in high school band. It was like giving up your soul and your life. Like you had no free time. You know what I mean?
Right. So then did you put a band together or did you join a band? What, I guess the right question would be, where did the avenue of you going from playing drums for pleasure to you playing drums for a profession?
Career. Okay, so I started playing with bands when I was 15, 16,
Okay.
and I got kicked out of my first band for being bad at drum kit,
Oh,
which is
nice.
funny. So I think that was around 15 years old, and I couldn't stand for that. So I doubled down on my. I got a few lessons. I started buying books. I knew how to read sheet music, which gave me an edge over everyone else. So
For sure.
I bought like 10 books stacked this tall of all different kinds of things I could read and study for drums. And from 15 to 18, I put around 10,000 hours of practice time into drumming. So by the time I was graduating high school, I was in a those churches like Assemblies of God and stuff like that. They have these like fine arts things where all different types of arts people can compete in, and they had drum solo competitions in those. So Florida had one, and there was like maybe 20 drummers or something like that, and I won that with a drum solo there. And then they would invite you out to a national contest. So anyone that won their state, top two won their state, were invited out. And when I was 17, I won it. And then I went to DC to compete in DC, and I came in fourth out of like 98 drummers or something like that.
Wow.
And then the next year I was 18, I won Florida again, and then went to Austin, Texas, and I came in first in that one out of 104 drummers.
Wow.
So, and during that time, lots and lots and lots of studying. I mean, I was on it, so to speak. And like, I had a big passion for it. I started, since I studied all these books and watched these videos, I was really interested in becoming what's called a clinician, a guy that tours around and teaches drums, has events and things. And I pursued that. And then, when I was 18 to 20, I was touring with a band called Providence. I think I did around 1,000 shows with them in like 2 years or something like that. No. Sorry, that'd be ridiculous. I think I did about 800 shows with them over the course of like 2 years, because we played a lot, like sometimes doubles a day, double shows in a day.
In a day.
Yeah, and then I went on tour a little bit with this band, Martyr's Prayer, and then I took off with a band called Send Out Scuds. And during that time, I got internationally endorsed. I got picked up by Mapex as an artist, Vic Firth, Evans. I shot down an endorsement from Peisty. Like Dave McIntosh from Dragon Force actually was getting me that endorsement.
Wow.
And Dom Famularo, who is older drummer, who's a really talented guy, who's part of Vic Firth and Mapex's teams, he was telling me to hold out. He wanted me to be with Sabian. And I got a call from Sabian, which was the coolest. Like, this is like the pinnacle of my drumming career. I have
Right.
Sabian calling, and they're like, listen, because you're not in a major labeled band, like, we can't endorse you. And they said that we could hook you up with some cymbals, and we could feature some stuff in your videos on YouTube. And they said, but we can't do that yet because, and this is funny, because the Black Eyed Peas and the Red Hot Chili Peppers affected my life in some way. Like, their drummers broke too many cymbals on their tour that year and blew Sabian's budget because they had to keep replacing their cymbals because they're so heavy-handed. So I couldn't get any cymbals from Sabian because of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Black Eyed Peas, because they got all the cymbals already. So, but
How funny.
I was really passionate about it, and I was pursuing again, education. I was writing a book. I had a big notebook of rudiments, and all multi-limb rudiments. So it was like all, both arms, both legs, and ways to build independence.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody stole that book from me at one of the shows I was playing at, which is unfortunate. And it was very similar to what Benny Greb came up with years later. I think it was like the second DVD he came out with. It's like The Language of Drumming or something like that, about moving accents around things. But anyways, I worked on so much stuff specifically for Mapex, and then they came up with a big update on their website that was like really tailored towards beginners. Like I'm saying, like it seemed like it's aimed at like children and seniors, which it makes sense to me now, but at the time it rubbed me the wrong way because I was an intermediate to advanced drummer. I was like, this isn't cool. So I went online and dumped all my education stuff for free online. I went and created all this content, dumped it all online. I pissed off a lot of pro drummers. I got direct messages from pro drummers that were furious at me because I released techniques for free on YouTube that they were charging $200 for these online funnels that were from 15, 14 years ago. And I was like, that's it. I had it. So I dumped it all. And then I kind of quit the industry and I went into sales.
Wow. What a story, dude.
Yeah.
That's okay. So was there any particular reason why you went into sales after that? Was there either a
Good pay.
previous job? Oh, so it was just the pay.
Yeah. With little experience. I mean, if anybody out there wants to start making like money, like get into sales and learn
That's
that.
so
That's like, yeah, like, we want these specialty jobs. They're going to pay us like $25, $30 an hour, but literally the highest paying skill you can get if you get good at it is sales. And then you just gotta move around the industries. I mean, you can be into like right now, you can get paid the most, probably selling cloud computing and like software sales.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's very fair.
But yeah, if you're good at sales, you're the most valuable person in the team. It's even marketing. Like if the salespeople at the end, they handle the ends of your marketing funnels to close, especially a high ticket item that's like $5, $10, $100,000. Like most important person is the guy's going to carry that to a close.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. And it's kind of funny that you said that because I would say the one career path that got me moving forward in the right direction was when I finally got into sales. It's when I started making a bigger impact on my income. And I think you're right. I think also sales, the skill of being well in sales rolls over into a lot of different aspects in life.
Especially if you get good at
service.
it. Especially if you get good at it.
Well,
I mean, because
very much so.
like there's a lot of like psychology in sales. And when I was touring as a drummer, I bought sociology books and psychology books. So I studied different mannerisms in people and how to read people, how to posture myself, how should I stand. Almost like a cheat sheet in how to be a human being in sales to make someone feel comfortable. And I did that so I can better network. And that's how I got all my endorsements.
So then you would say that from that information that you were able to learn, you saw a significant difference in the results.
Yeah. I mean, even like me, just imagine like I have to make phone calls and emails to all these drum companies. Like Vic Firth and Mapex didn't come to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I called vendors, asked for introductions, found the right people, and then like based on tone of speech and people that I can tell who liked me and who didn't have time for me. And when I found the right people that were kind of investing in my brand, so to speak, I leaned into those people, created relationships and network. And this is all networking.
Right.
And then created content, got the introductions, and then really just getting better at reading the room and discussions,
Well, then it seems like it makes more sense on why you decided to go to sales, because if you were doing that while you were drums, you were essentially marketing yourself from day one.
Yeah.
You had to get good at it in order to even get yourself out there.
Yeah.
So that and that makes a lot of sense. And then obviously moving from sales into your marketing position, and over the time you've been able to develop and learn more about the industry, and field where it gives you more of an advantage. Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm would assume that that's how you feel about it as well.
It's completely on accident, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if it wasn't for all my experiences, I wouldn't be as good as I am now.
Well,
Especially my study habits I developed.
I'm curious if, if you didn't go the avenues that you went, but if you would have chosen different avenues, whether or not you would still come out roughly in the same industry. Because, at least from what it sounds like, you have always, at least when you put your mind to something, you pursue it.
Yeah.
That's a attribute that I don't think, well, not everybody has. I would even arguably say that maybe not a lot of people in general have it, just because, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you practice something 18 minutes a day, every day for a year, you'll be better than 90% of the world at that thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, daily exposure to any type of practice is going to improve you.
So most people, I would arguably say, don't have the will to put in the effort into the things that they'd want or that they have interest in for whatever reason.
I would say specifically today for sure.
Right?
Definitely when we were younger, but I think there's not a lot of will to push today.
No, I agree.
And I think that has to do with serotonin divergence is what people talk about.
Well, so I agree. I do think that plays a contributing factor. That's going to come from things like social media. We tend to focus on things that we can't control, which is why I'm also a big advocate of trying to encourage that anytime there's something going on in our lives, or that we have things going on, that the first person to try to look to for answers is going to be, if you believe in higher power, but you start reflecting on yourself. You need to look at what you can do, because only you can control what you do, right?
Yeah, there's just extreme accountability. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who don't want to take on that accountability in order for them to be able to move forward with the things and issues that they have going on.
Have you heard the term serotonin divergence before?
I've heard it, but not explained.
Okay, so
I have an assumption of what it would be.
So I mean, our dopamine receptors are all messed up right now, all of us. And like right now, the dopamine that we get in our daily life is just from quick pleasures. Like, let's call it low risk, low reward. Like, that's kind of how many brains are kind of programmed right now. Imagine we can only watch 30-second, 1-minute clips. If we're watching a TikTok that's over a minute long, at about a minute and a half, you're like, what's going on? How long is this TikTok? You know what I mean?
Right. Our attention.
Yeah. So it's like a morphine button. Like, it's just like you just get these quick hits off dopamine. Serotonin comes from bouts of time under tension and stress. You have to work for it. Like you get something that takes some time and some grinding, like a long run. When you're done, like that's when you get not just you get a good hit of dopamine, but you get serotonin as well. But our body recognizes what it takes to get serotonin. So like when the idea comes up to do the thing that will give us serotonin, we go, we got that dopamine button, and like that makes more sense to our brain because it's low risk, low reward, and like really pushing yourself towards harder projects and more time being uncomfortable is pretty much, I think, the cheat sheet to long lasting improvements in mental health and success in your career. But you got to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. I absolutely.
I tell a lot of my friends that reach out to me, it's like an ice bath or an ice shower, a cold shower. A lot of people go, I can't do that. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, I'm not ready for that. I'm like, there is no amount of prep that's going to make an ice bath not feel like an ice bath. It's always going to suck. Same thing when you start that diet, which I'm dieting right now and it sucks. But it's like when you start that diet, it sucks. I love doing jujitsu, and those first few rolls and engagements that you have in jiu-jitsu, when the cardio goes up, it sucks. It always sucks, you know what I mean? But the sleep afterwards, that overwhelming feeling of like some serotonin and the appropriate amounts of like dopamine that you earned, like does so much more than, you know, doom scrolling on social or buying a shitty meal or procrastinating on your work.
Yeah.
So
What's actually interesting with what you said, one of the things that has been proven to be more successful than talking therapy, medication, anything of the sort for mental health is exercising, incorporating daily exercises to your day-to-day life.
yeah,
That has shown more progress in benefiting people's mental health than anything else. And if I can encourage anything on this podcast, it's going to be focusing on things that people can do on their own individually to better themselves and move in the right direction. I think a lot of what you were talking about pertains to the fact that you're right. Our society has conditioned themselves to view things this way. And one of the first steps of being able to break this is going to be acknowledging it. And just like how our brain was trained to function this way, we do have the ability to train our brain to do other things. The problem is, I think we have constant distractions in our society, and the phone being pertained to be one of the big ones because of the social media getting, like you said, dead
doom scrolling.
Yeah. I've heard another term. I can't remember it on the top of my head right now, but that's really funny because I absolutely agree with that. That's, you get so lost in the reels. Every platform now has it and does it because they know they're grabbing your attention span.
It's affected marketing at a very, very high level. Like, I mean, the how strategies have changed specifically since COVID. Totally different ad buying game, you know.
Yeah, I heard because I some of my friends that they have their own businesses, that TikTok advertising has blown up significantly.
It depends on what your service is, but yeah, their platform still kind of sucks in my opinion. Depends what your service is. Selling products, I think it'd be solid.
Yeah, so they have like a one's a clothing brand, the other one's a beard brand.
They sell online products.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's perfect for TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's a local service, it's like hit and miss. You need to be in like a major metropolitan area, and
Right.
maybe it has targeting. So
Yeah, no, it's social media has definitely changed everything. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with someone on whether or not social media has had a good impact, and I would say in the beginning it did, but it has moved into a direction where I think it's done more negative than positive at this point. Not that it can't be used for good, but because of the amount of negative that comes from it, I don't think we will ever be able to surpass it.
it's trash, man. I mean, like what it's done to us as society. I mean, even like in the dating realm and world of what it's done for people. Like, I mean, divorces are all time high right now. A lot of people blame COVID for that, and I don't. I think it's actually the ability of a lack of accountability and opportunity. You know what I mean? How cops say like, don't leave stuff on the front seat of your car, you know, because it makes people want to break in. You know, and I'm just talking right now. You know what I mean? I'm not just not prepared.
The problem with social media when it comes to dating is it constantly creates a thought process that, you know what, if what I have here, I'm not happy with it, so I'm gonna find something else better out there.
Yeah, and then if I
And there's
commit
a
to
problem with
this,
that.
what if something better comes? And what is better? And I think people ask that question without really defining what those parameters are.
And that's a great point. And I think those get defined on social media, on things that cannot actually be shown to be real. We take very artificial circumstances and situations and presume them to be achievable and real. And The same thing with filters. This, you know, that the persona that people project online is not the person that's behind the screen.
Right. Right.
That's huge. Like that's a big problem in the world, and it has nothing to do with the fact of being superficial. It has everything to do with the fact that if you are going to lie to me about who you are from the beginning, what kind of relationship do you think would ever develop out of it?
Right.
It's just not, I don't understand where someone could believe that they could achieve a healthy relationship out of starting one that way. But everybody handles things differently.
Right.
So, and I would arguably say that there's no evidence to show that anything like that even works. But
Well, to kind of pull it back, we're talking about how people don't know. So people don't know how to fix themselves, diagnose themselves, or anything like that. I mean, there's a difference between like mental disorders, personality disorders. What else is mood, personality, mental? You know what I mean?
so I would actually, to your statement, I would say people are actually quite willing to diagnose themselves. They're not willing to do anything about it.
Right. Actually, all right, you bring a good point. When someone says they have ADHD or OCD, I always ask, like, were you diagnosed with that? Did you do tests? And no. And I'm like, it's not really cool to do that because, like, ADHD and ADD, I've grown up with it, you know. And when you get it bad, it could be debilitating, you know. It is hard to deal with. Like, you know, I have to be vigorously honest about it all the time. Like, I have 2 project management systems. I have a notebook where I'm always taking notes on it, and like I have to like hack myself all the time. You know, if I have like, I got to make sure that I don't ever transition into a state of procrastination, or because like ADD is being found to be something that turns into bipolar type 2. It develops into that eventually, you know? So like staying on top of it is like vital. Because once you're in like the bipolar type 2 hypomania phase of things, you know, you're like, I'm in mania, I'm going, and you're until you burn out. And when you burn out, that's the drop, you know? So you'll have these like 3-day drops where you can't, feels like you just can't even move or work.
Yeah, so just out of curiosity then, to dive into that a little bit, how long have you been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD?
Since second or third grade.
Second or third grade.
Yeah.
So since then, have you been able to, okay, so you said that you have 2 project managing programs and a notebook to essentially maintain yourself, right? So you have been able to create outside situations that you have control over to be able to maintain what you can't control, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not that I'm gonna say I can't control it because it's just a disorder. You know what I mean? It's not a disability. You know, a lot of people get these crisscrossed. It's just a disorder. So it's a matter of just being vigorously honest about it, taking and being able to take action against it. Again, that cold bath, like waking up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. to start my work day before my kids wake up or before my phone starts ringing, like that 5 a.m. wake up, like that's the cold bath, you know. And then looking at the work and just starting that first task, that's the hardest part. Like that's actually the saying in like a really popular ADD podcast that's out there right now, whereas the hardest part is to start. And you know, that's the tribe. Hardest part's to start. So start, and then you'll get your work done. And a lot of people out there that don't struggle with this will say that sounds like the stupidest thing, but it's not. You know, you gotta start.
Well, so what I have found when it comes to people having perspectives like that is they view it that way because they just don't understand because they never experienced it, right? So if you're going in with this conversation with not because you've never experienced it, you don't understand it. So the best thing to do is just ask questions, right? So if just wanted to go back real quick. You said there was a difference between a disease versus a disability.
Disorders and
Disorder
disabilities
versus a disability. Yes.
I mean, I can't speak too confidently on that.
Well, I'm asking more your opinion, right? And not asking for
I think there's no fixing it if it's disability.
Okay.
I think that's permanent. You
So
know,
do you
like
think
I
you
had
could fix your
bipolar.
ADHD
I had bipolar
or
type
ADD?
2 and BPD for a minute. You know, and I would did so much psychotherapy, and EMDR to essentially break down those barriers. I mean, to the point where I'm in remission for them now. You know, but
So do you think then your ADD is something that you can eventually overcome?
I think, well, ADD has a lot to do with receptors in the brain. So I think it's something that I have overcame. You know, it's just that I don't think it's something that necessarily heals unless, like, I honestly, I think, like, a lot of people talk about this dopamine fast, and, like, that's a big fad for me. You know what I mean? But I do think disconnecting from our pleasures is super vital at times. You know, like, learn to maybe fast for a day or 2 days. Don't jump on the phone, you know, have a vacation away from the computer and the screens, you know, and just spend time with family or read a book, do your exercise, like a weekend where spend a weekend doing chores and reading books and focusing on your health and spending time with your family and don't do anything else. Like, I would say after 3 days, you'd be like, you know, I don't really have a very depressed feeling right now. You know what I mean? Like,
So I guess the reason why I'm harping on this is because I wholeheartedly agree with you. So at least in my perspective, when it comes to ADD or ADHD, it's something that, again, I agree. I don't think it ever truly goes away, which is why I wouldn't necessarily call it a disease, because I do believe a disease is something that can be overcome.
yeah,
I
not a
wouldn't
disease.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't particularly put it under a either a disability or anything that would per se prevent you from being able to do a lot, because I think it's something that you can learn to deal with just like other issues.
You can, but you definitely have to develop some type of character that can overcome it. I mean, we're talking neurochemical pathway issues, which is essentially going to give us strange impulsivity. You know, there's going to be, impulsiveness and having the function to control impulse is a big thing that's difficult with ADHD. That's why you'll find them in remote jobs, like playing games during the day. You know what I mean? And then, like, they'll all say the same, like, garbage. I mean, I'm talking about myself because I've been there, but it's like, I just work better under pressure. It's like, no, you just, you don't find time to, you just don't dedicate the time to start. You know, they're motivated by pressure. And then at the same time, we tend to complain about anxiety, you know, but it's all because it's all our own doing. So
No, and it's 100%, and that's why I think when you're able to notice it and then identify it, you can start implementing things in your life to help deal with it.
do you know what's really cool when you really get into studying this stuff? Like, because I've studied in depth, like, what is ADHD, ADD, what is borderline personality disorder, what is depression and anxiety, bipolar, even like histrionic personality disorder, things like that. Like, that's a really curious one. Histrionic personality disorder. Do you know that one?
No. What is that one specifically?
Yeah, is it in that book you have there?
So I have personality disorder.
Look up histrionic personality disorder. Personality disorder.
All right. So personality disorder is individuals that display persistent and consistent unhealthy patterns of thinking, behavior, and social functioning. is the definition of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it does not have, it has paranormal or paranoid personality disorder, schizo personality
Some
disorder.
of those are pretty intense.
And so let me tell you, while doing my schooling for marriage and family therapy, right, we go over the different diagnoses and disorders. And of course, there's different levels to each one. And individuals who experience schizophrenia and experiencing essentially like the voices in their head,
Yeah.
there's a video on YouTube that you can watch that just gives you a perspective on the sounds and different things that go on that people would essentially hear in their head. And I think the video is about maybe 7 minutes long, and just probably 3 minutes in, I had to turn it off. It
Mm-hmm.
was incredibly overwhelming on the amount of sounds and things that are constantly happening, that it truly, the idea behind the assignment was to give somebody a perspective of what they're experiencing so that you can kind of look at it a little differently. Because just like with what I was mentioning before, when people don't really understand what someone's going through, they immediately go with, that doesn't make sense, that's dumb. They critique it because they'd rather not feel dumb. They'd rather insult you to make your view look dumb, which is really
Well, I think people dismiss it because they can't relate to it.
that too. I think that it kind of just all comes into play together with that, because when somebody doesn't understand, it's it's that feeling of, I don't want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why people have such an issue with being wrong.
It's just a level of thinking. I mean, like, people worry about being wrong, but that's just because they fail to consider, like, one, why they're wrong. They fail to think about the perception of them being wrong to other people, you know. And then eventually, if you think high enough about it and get outside of it more, you'll see it's not a big deal to be
No,
wrong.
no, yeah, most definitely. And I find it, I would say, you tend to find the most humbling people when they are willing to acknowledge they're wrong. And anything, I mean, you shows, movies, anytime you have a character that is a very high wisdom individual that is respected, they're typically a humbling individual. And I would even arguably say that they tend to be individuals that have done things bad in their past that made them to become more of a humble individual when they were older.
Yeah, I can see that. And speaking of that, like studying this stuff, I'm sure you can relate to this because you've studied it. But, I can kind of identify possible like spectrums of personality disorders dealing with people. Like I've had the opportunity to deal with a few billionaires in my life, a lot of multimillionaires, lots of business owners, people scraping the bottom, people that are, you know, hitting escape velocity, that are doing really good, people out there have been coasting the top for a long time. And it's interesting when you can start noticing people's, because I think a lot of people think personality disorders or mood disorders and all this stuff are rare when they're insanely common. I think we all have some level of these disorders. Like if you come out unscathed in this climate,
There's a theory behind that that we actually have a little bit of everything. It's just like kind of like cancer. It only like some people have an extra of certain issues more than others, but everybody has a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Which is why I would arguably say, again, I'm a big advocate to not taking medication at all if possible. So I'm an advocate of, if you're able to at least identify what you might have going on, you then incorporate things that can help address those problems. And that, I think, which is why in your circumstance, you were talking about that people need to be able to train themselves to be able to do these things and to be able to see these things, right? And I agree with you. I think one of the biggest issues that people have is they think that there is no solutions and it's just that they haven't been exposed to that solution or thought of that solution yet. So if we could get more people to be exposed, which is again the idea of this podcast, to get more people to be exposed to just different perspectives, different ideas of how they can handle themselves to be able to control what they have going on, they will then be able to see more positive outcomes within their lives.
I don't know. I blame Gen X. Well, I just think the absence of like I didn't really have a father, and my mom abandoned me, and then my grandparents, quote unquote, raised me, but their most important thing was putting me in church. So I don't really remember studying. I think I have one memory ever of studying with someone in my family. Outside of that, I was just kind of lone wolf, and anything I wanted was fought against. So
was there nobody you looked up to or had to be able to talk to, maybe bounce, not necessarily ideas, but when something would come up, it'd be like, oh, can I talk to, like, I would talk to this person about it?
Yeah, people I probably shouldn't have talked to, really. I mean,
So like, not somebody that you would be.
It was a church. I think a church was, there was a lot of responsibility on a church to have raised me, and that church had at least at that time had a terrible reputation. So church just raised kids with fear, like that's really what's instilled in, especially evangelical stuff. When I was a kid, a lot of people will agree with me. A lot of people would be mad hearing me say that, but like, there was just a lot of fear.
Well, I do think that it would be hard to argue that fear is not a common tactic when you're being taught things in church, especially depending on what religion. I myself am diving back into the religion avenue myself and just learning more just to have my own perspective, because I was raised Catholic. I was taught specific rules, all these things that had to be done, and I myself did not agree or didn't like it. And the fact that I was forced to go when I didn't want to, I think anybody forced to do anything just creates that interest of not wanting to do it. So,
can I quiz you on something?
Dude, go for it.
Can I throw some at you?
Dude, hit me with it.
I've been studying the Bible pretty intensely, my whole life, and like I have a faith. I don't really introduce myself as a Christian to many people because I feel like my opinion on it is very different. Like I'm not a fan of super churches. I'm not but I don't need to talk about what I'm not a fan of. What is the overarching story of the Old Testament for you?
Of the Old Testament?
If you can sum it up in very brief statement, what is it, or at least what is it that you're inspired by, and what jumps out at you as like the theme of the Old Testament, speaking specifically to the Torah?
Okay, so I will, to answer your question, I'll kind of give you a little bit on what I know, and then go into at least what I can tell you about that I know about the Torah, because at the moment I was encouraged to start in the New Testament because it was easier to read. I started reading in Genesis, and I was doing one passage at a time to try to not overwhelm myself, but to at least still give myself an opportunity to try to focus on reading it. And it is a difficult one. So then I approached the audiobook aspect. And again, it's not that it can't be done. It's just, it's a lot to comprehend. And I, unfortunately, am an individual that I'm practicing reading more because I don't read a lot. And though I read for school, I just don't read for pleasure. So I need to work on my comprehension. And so I've been practicing trying to just read more in general. And the Bible is one of the books that I've been reading. So for the Old Testament, I know nothing more of essentially the creation. I know the 10 Commandments. I know of the story of Moses, but not from reading it, from what I've been taught. I know all of this is in the Old Testament, but I haven't actually gotten there in the book itself. So that I am aware of the Old Testament, that's about as far as I can get.
So here's what's interesting. So I'm going to just briefly just preface this when I say this.
Yeah.
In the political climate of what's happening in the Middle East, specifically with Israel and Palestine, stuff's not cool out there. I'm super bummed out that there's so many people dying right now. It's crazy. So when I speak political climate of what is Israel today, I don't think anything stands up biblically, what I'm about to talk about. So whatever I say now doesn't endorse nothing happening in the Middle East. But I'll say this though. The theme of the Old Testament that I found was God perpetually making promises to people, covenants. And I think he made, I'm trying to rattle them off in my head. He made one to Noah that you imagine a handshake, make a deal. And Noah didn't have to do anything. He just says, "Hey, I won't flood the earth again." That was one promise.
Right.
And then he made a promise to Abraham. And then he, again, a covenant promise there, made a promise to, I think, David, But it's perpetually been a build up to what is Israel the whole time. All God ever really asked for in the Old Testament was, "Hey, listen, I want to give you this amazing life. You just gotta live the life. You just gotta stay in line. You just do these few things I ask," which always summed up to love people, all this stuff. And really, the books get a little weird around Leviticus, where Moses has the 10 Commandments and the law changes, and they're building a temple. And I'm always very curious about, because it's like a 90-degree turn. It's like a 180. It's very, very different. I don't know what degree turn, but it's just, where'd this come from? Really, where did all that come from? Because there wasn't really that before. So, the thing is this though, God was always saying, "I want to give you your best life. I want you to be your best you. You just have to do X, Y, Z things." And the cycle has always been, when things are good, Israel messed up. When Israel messed up, they were put in captivity and slavery. And then they'd be, "Oh, I don't want to be in this terrible space." Repent. Somebody is sent to pull them out. And then they're good again. And that's the cycle over and over and over and over again. And that's perpetuated through Samuel, Judges, Kings. It does, those are all the stories of everything that happened, I think, through Leviticus and Numbers and things like that. It's just, so God wanted something absolutely fantastic for people that just kept failing. I mean, do you know what Israel means? It means to wrestle with God, So that's the wrestle. And that's actually comes full circle back to what we're talking about with us trying to be good people. Who are we wrestling? Are we wrestling ourselves, or are we wrestling for that better life? Are we fighting for pleasure, or are we fighting for progress?
Well, I think what religion, and I also think when people have kids, this plays into a factor. When you start putting others before yourself, where you actually consider about others before yourself, you tend to look at the world a little differently.
Yeah. Well, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John in the New Testament, if you want to sum all those books up, it's your proof of your love of God will be in your love for people, and the proof of love for people will be in your love for God. So if you aren't loving people, then don't expect you to really believe that you love God. It's just not a real thing.
So, and I wholeheartedly agree, which is why I myself wanted to start learning on my own, started really having a reason to look into it and start exploring. For me, was raised and grew up Catholic. And one of the things that I now question a lot of is a lot of the rules that the Catholic religion has been created and developed by the officials in the Vatican, which means that none of these rules, not none of them, but all the rules that are not in the Bible, but the Catholic religion has, I'm curious on why they exist if it's not requested in theory directly by God.
Yeah, there's very little evidence that any of the practices in Catholicism is even necessary.
So, and that's where like I don't try to be insulting to anybody because it's not my position whatsoever. I am one that I like to be able to ask questions, and I respect anybody that can say I don't know in comparison to give me an answer that they can't provide a reasoning of where it came from.
Yeah, right.
So that definitely has skewed my view when it comes to religion, and this is a deep rabbit hole.
Well, I think, yeah, it is. I mean, I think Catholicism, at least in its roots, was developed because people couldn't read. I think it was a natural progression, and then it just sort of became a destabilizing tactic, and building, tagging religion and faith to obedience with law could be, adding repercussions to not showing up for your faith is a good way to control people.
Yeah,
But imagine though, let me give you some context though, okay, really quick. So, how powerful writing and reading was. So in the first century AD, I mean, when the majority of the New Testament was written in the first 100 years of, 0 to 100 AD, and only 10% were capable of. I don't really understand some of these numbers too well, but like they say that only 10% can write, and only 3% can read, and which is interesting because I don't know how you can write without reading, but so it's even talked about in 2 Corinthians when Paul writes his letter there, because Paul was being rejected by the Corinthians mostly. And that letter is like, hey, watch out. There's, these things called super apostles, and people are writing their other texts. And there's books, since there's a missing book in the Bible that we haven't found yet. We call it Q. We're pretty sure Matthew and Luke are quoting it. We would think there was a Proverbs style book of Jesus sayings. Yeah, it's called Quell. Is what we called it. We haven't found it. I'm pretty sure the Vatican probably have it in the archives. But so since people can't really read or write, yeah, I think it's natural for the Catholic Church to kind of formed how it was. Like even, that passage people complain about where it says like women shouldn't talk in church, and like women are like kind of like mad about it. How that actually translates is like these are small church gatherings, and women were asking a lot of questions during service, so it was like kind of disruptive. And what Paul was saying in that was like charging the men with responsibility. And remember, I'm talking contextually of that time. Like I mean, like it's not like people weren't educated then. So
everything was looked at.
Everything's very different then. So back then, he said, "Men, go home. What are you doing? Talk to your wives. Teach your wives." Back then, like go home and teach them. Women served a way different role in that era.
Well, I will say this. Even looking at right now, statistically, families who a father is not involved in religion, the household is like 20% likely to follow a religious faith. If a father is in a religion, then that family is like 80% likelihood of going to be following that religion. And when they did the same numbers for the wives, it was like 30%. And so it was not a small difference. It was a significant difference on the influence that the father would have in the household in comparison to the mother when they looked at that. Now, mind you, I don't know what the substance of that that study was there could be skewed views that can try to encourage that view. I don't know. I do know that existed, but I do think that religion, I think, plays an important fact into society, because even though I do agree that when you try to force people to follow a religion by creating laws around it, I think the laws that we all agree with, even if you're not religious and you're more secular, I think we still agree upon the laws that currently exist, which I would arguably say stemmed from religion in the first place, right? So we don't kill people because it's wrong. And though the moral decision, we believe it's not right to kill somebody because it's taken somebody's life, the question would be, where does that moral come from? Right? Because in theory, there are other religions and other moral perspectives that view taking a life as not an issue.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some kind of, moral universal consciousness in certain things. I mean,
do you?
Well, I think, like, man, I'm so not prepared. This is a topic I haven't touched on in a very long time. So,
well, the goal is, and I'm sorry, anything you don't want to talk about, you don't have to.
Oh no, I'll talk about anything. I have questions and curiosities when it comes to this. Like,
I do too.
Like our morality and our decision making. Like, how based is this on economic statuses and social statuses? Like, this pulls me, like, morals change based on, I think, our levels of desperation.
I do agree to some extent, but I think
criminology says that criminology says economy creates crime.
But we still have, okay, so I do agree, but there are still rooted crimes that have existed since the dawn of time that we have established, like, so not to kill, not to steal.
But people kill and people steal.
We have it and we agree upon it as a rule, because as an overall decision, we agree that that's to maintain a healthy society. We agree that that is not a way to maintain a healthy society. I would also even arguably say that adultery is also in that category, even though it's legal. Ironically enough, it's not legal in the military, right? So if you're in the military and you commit adultery, you go to jail. But we don't agree to that as a crime now because of society has chosen to be okay with that. But to whether or not that decision was a positive impact to society, I think would be a debatable statement, because we still practice, for the most part, for people to not cheat. And when people do cheat, we try to take steps to correct that problem. Even though we want to dictate it as not to be a crime, fair enough. I don't think somebody should go to jail for it, but I think there should be some type of accountability to some of these decisions. But I do agree with you, though, in the aspect that there are a lot of social and economic issues that are created as we progress.
I think, like, it's just, I don't even know if the word economic is the right word, but, there's a pattern. I think we could predict a lot of, when people diverge from a normal moral compass, they do something that's like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Wow, that seemed intense. Why did you kill that person? Why did you steal that food? Why do you do these shady things with the
question becomes is, what do you consider a normal moral concept?
Well, I mean, like what you're saying, like, stuff, these universally accepted ones were like, hey, let's not steal.
I think all of these came from the Bible. And that's why I want to make clear on my position. I think majority of our, if not all of our, true moral values.
Don't steal. I don't think don't steal didn't come from the Bible. I think don't steal was.
I mean, it's a commandment.
Oh, yeah. I think that existed at the point of trade, like from the point of like as soon as you had something to offer, like
It could, I guess. The only documented thing to back up would be the religion, I guess, because we can at least say that there's a foundation within the Bible that stems farther back than we can comprehend. Whereas I don't know if there's any evidence to show that stealing was considered a crime even before the Ten Commandments.
I'm pretty well. I don't know how
I don't
things.
actually know.
Yeah, I don't know how things stack, especially like, um, because I mean our longest recorded history.
Because also killing
Huh?
was probably considered a bad thing too, maybe.
Yeah, I mean like even
So I
Cain and
agree with
Abel
you.
and things like that.
Right.
So which is
So I do agree that these things stem farther back than religion. But I
are you
think
saying it's cool?
no. I am a person that I think God. I believe in God, and I think that He presented us with these rules for a reason. Because if we don't follow these rules, they tend to lead us toward a direction of a more difficult life. Not a bad life. I think just a more difficult life.
You know what I think helps as soon as someone turns to some type of higher power. I think what it initially develops when someone's serious about it is a new routine.
Mm.
And I think that's ultimately like if someone is whatever it is they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're part of a religion or you're pursuing a higher power, you are instantaneously putting something between 5 and 10% of every day of your schedule into that. And those people see positive improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is just me being very challenging at the moment.
Please.
You know what I mean? So it's just take God completely out of the picture, where you're taking a guaranteed 5-10% every day to devote towards improving yourself. You know, towards, hey, I'm going to wake up and go for the run and I'm going to meal prep my food in the first hour of the day. And then, you know, your meals are prepped. You got your run in, you know, you're an hour and a half into your morning. Your kids aren't awake yet. And then you have been hit with you've completed an uncomfortable task. You get hit with serotonin and dopamine. And then you start your day off there with the proper chemicals. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like and that person consistently does it, and they build a new trained neurochemical pathway of a challenging, disciplined routine right in the morning that sets the tempo for the day. That person goes, I changed my whole life by waking up at 5 a.m. You know, or I changed my life when I started devoting time towards reading the wisdom books in the Bible, whether it's, you know, Proverbs, Psalms, Job, like understanding those books can impact you in a positive way because they'll challenge how you think about things, you know, but digesting and putting time into uncomfortable things, because no one initially wants to do any of this stuff. We want to sleep, you know, I mean, we want the cheap, easy meals, you know, yeah, no one wants to put in the time. A lot of people claim they don't have the time, but that's my opinion.
No, I wholeheartly agree with you, man. So I got one more question for you before we go ahead and let this go. No. So my question is, if out of all of the challenges that you've been able to overcome, what neuropath that you had to create in your life that you have found to be the most impacting in your success? So whatever got you to be that you realize, wow, this has really helped me be able to continue moving forward in my journey.
It really is. Yeah, it's accountability. Just knowing where, again, how I messed up. But I'd say the thing that changed my approach was when I started talking to a professional. I mean, like, psychotherapy is invaluable. A lot of people are so resistant to the idea of like talking to someone because, like, here's the thing. I remember when I did the personality test and I said that, hey, there's a little bit of BPD here, which stemmed from my sensitivities growing up as a kid. You know what I mean? A lot of rejection and stuff. And then some bipolar type 2. We got to work on this. And I was like, okay. And I researched it. I'm talking, I read and listened to everything I could about BPD, everything I could about bipolar, everything I could about ADHD. And once I found out there was all these chemicals involved in the brain and poor neurochemical pathways, I dove into that. I want to understand neurochemical pathways. How do they work? Can they be altered? Like, I understood it. And like, that's the thing. If you're struggling with something in your life, if it has a name, you can attack it. You know, if it's unknown, then like you don't have a strategy in how to attack it, you know?
It's actually funny that you said that, because I would have a conversation with someone that they believe that the reason why so many people are willing to diagnose themselves is because everything has a name now. And my argument to that was exactly what you said. I think when you have a name, though, yes, can somebody abuse the concept to be like, oh, I have this, so they just chuck it up to being the excuse rather than a a hurdle. And when you have a name, you can identify specifically what it is, how you can address it, and then you can actually actively partake into doing something about it. So
Right.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that, and that is awesome.
So think of it like our chess games. How often do you play a game with me and play it back? Review the entire game.
I don't review the whole game. I look to see what my blunders were, my
So
blunders and my mistakes.
so review the whole game. And that's what you do with everything. Like,
Fair
I
enough.
come out of a business meeting that went well or didn't go well. I always have a moment where I review how did that go, and I vigorously will do inventory on that. You know, review your day at night before bed. Like, you know, where could I have done something better today? You know, just like reviewing your day before you start it. Just try to put your life before you act. Just add a pause to everything and really take a moment to think about how you're going to say things and take time to learn. Like, if you have common pitfalls you keep messing up, like, why do I keep breaking diet? Why do I not work out? Why do I procrastinate? Dig deeper. Find out what that reason could be and explore it and be honest with it. And when you learn these things, once you learn patterns and you learn how to overcome them, that changes your social interactions with people that are also struggling with it. The one thing I haven't had a chance to say yet is that me studying this stuff, when I deal with somebody, I can see when someone struggles with some amount of borderline personality disorder. I can see it. I can hear it in their tone. I can hear where their sensitivities are at, you know, which changes everything with how I interact with certain people. So arm yourself with the information to improve yourself. But it all comes down to making time, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree, man. Well, listen, dude, thank you so much for doing this. This was absolutely amazing. I think we were able to provide some good conversation, just different perspectives for people to be able to hear. That's my goal. I just want to get people in conversations, just talking about why people could benefit from really not only reflecting on themselves, taking advantage, and if you do feel like there's something going on, to not be scared to go and talk to a therapist, not be scared of being able to explore and actually learning if there is something wrong. You can do something about it. It's not that it's the end of the world. It's not that it's going to hold you back. If anything, not doing anything about it, I would arguably say holds you back way more than doing something about it. And I do think that more people, if you choose to be active in your life to help yourself, you're going to see results. So, but again, thank you so much, man. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Like and subscribe the video, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.